previously, we approved some lead teachers. What we're looking at doing tonight, Ms. Cinda, is we are looking to approve some reading specialists. We previously approved that job description and bring some names forward, and we had some applicants apply, and the names are on the agenda as stated, but we are asking for your support tonight as it's going to help continue to support our efforts in the realm of literacy. And again, this is all privileged, approved and discussed at the policy personnel as well as academic. We are now just following up on it. At this time, Ms. Cinda, I'll address any questions you or the committee may have.
I don't have any questions. I do think that this is a very good thing, especially with the pandemic. We need to work extra hard and make sure that we're doing everything we can for the elementary kids and keeping them on track to being good readers. So I'm all for it.
Okay. If it's okay with you, Ms. Cinda, can I move on to the next one?
Absolutely.
Okay, the next thing we have to discuss this evening is the long-term substitutes. Ms. Cinda, at the last academic committee meeting, we discussed about social distancing, class size, and what direction the board wanted to go. At that committee meeting, the academic committee empowered us to go ahead and add the temporary position for third grade. As you know, we had a waiting list of anywhere between 4 to 5 kids as a result of that initial meeting. That the next day, I believe, we had 1 or 2 more third graders that were wishing to come back. Mr. Springer was also charged with the work on, at his level, filling the class, so it's at least above 10 to offset some other class sizes. So they are definitely doing that and working on that. But tonight, we're just memorializing it. Again, this person is a good fit because they worked at East Pike previously when there's a maternity leave issue there. So it made sense for us to move forward and bring this person, right to the committee's attention this evening. So they'll be familiar with their kids and they'll be familiar with the families and the curriculum, most importantly, the curriculum. So basically, she went from that maternity leave position. If the board's able and willing to do tonight, she'll go into this long-term temporary position until the board so chooses to end it. Mr. Springer wrote the letter of support to Miss Amy about it. They're on the same page, and we're able to act as quick as tomorrow if the board so chooses. But it is reflective of everything we've been discussing, Ms. Cinda, and that the academic committee supported as well. But we are ready to strike per se tonight if the board's willing to do so.
I think we should go. I have no problem with it. I think it's good.
Okay. The next thing we'd like to go over, Ms. Cinda, if you're okay with it, we want to talk about some staffing, some science positions. Mr. Heinrich worked with Mr. McElhaney and Mr. Johnson to review the caseloads and assignments and student enrollment numbers, and we came to the determination that there is a need to replace both science positions. So what we are doing this evening is we are seeking permission from the board to post, advertise, and interview for 2 secondary science positions at the high school. One would have a biology/general science cert, and the other one would most likely have a chemistry cert. Mr. McElhaney again worked with Mr. Heinrich to see what was needed, what can go. Mr. McElhaney assured us that they'll have there's no periods of just hanging out or 5 periods of ideal, that they're going to have a full caseload that's responsible and respective of our taxpayers' money, because we know how much it costs to employ individuals. So we want to make sure that that money is well invested and protected. And Mr. McElhaney's on here. He can address any other questions. But at this point, it has my support, because after the work Mr. Heinrich did with Mr. McElhaney and Johnson, there is need to continue our programming, and we would like to fill these 2 positions. Mr. McElhaney, anything you'd like to add? I know we've been talking all year about the need to make sure we don't have 2 or 3 study halls on our schedule, that we're working a 4 caseload, et cetera. And you want to speak about their schedules or the need for these positions, sir?
I can. Thank you, Mr. Vukovich. Currently, there are 2 chemistry teachers who are retiring. And if you look at their schedule, the environmental science, which is a 9th grade class, which can be taught by any science teacher, that is the course that spills over into the chemistry department. There are currently 7 sections of that. That's why the biology general science position is sought, so that we can find somebody who can focus their energies and talents and experience and education on those 9th grade students, rather than it being a place in chemistry where it goes. So if you look at the remaining chemistry sections, that accounts for 2 positions.
So again, tonight we're asking for any questions that the committee may have and seeking the permission to post, advertise, interview. As always, the board has the final say in hiring. We would bring those names back to the board, and they will do an exhaustive search, meaning they'll use nationwide search engines as well as our local alternatives that are at our disposal. So that will include Indeed, some other different software that communicates with graduates and universities, as well as the Tribune Review, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and Tribune Democrat. And we'll also put on PSBA's Career Gateway website as well. Ms. Cindy.
So the only comment I have about this is that I really feel that every position that we advertise for, as far as teaching, we should really try to get somebody that's got dual certification so that we can use them in other places if we need them. And I don't remember for certain, but I think Mr. Palco had a chemistry and general science certificate. At least when I was at the school, he did all the general science classes. So if it wouldn't be an issue, I just think that we should maybe go for chemistry and general science, or chemistry and English, chemistry, a dual certification anyhow.
Ms. Cinda, what we could do, if you're okay with it, what we put on advertisement is dual certification preferred. And we can list some of those areas if that's okay with you.
Yep, that's perfect for me. Does
Okay.
anybody else have anything to say?
Hi, Cinda.
Hi, Tom.
I think a general dual certification, Mike, is useful without specifying which ones we're looking for. We need to get a broad range of candidates.
Yes, sir. We can work on that through HR. We can get something up here shortly. You know, we are getting to the point where it's getting harder and harder to find like the physics certified people. So any dual, to Ms. Cinda's point, any dual certification that we get just adds to our arsenal of weapons and classes that we can offer our students. So it makes absolute sense. And we can do that if the board so chooses. We can work on that tomorrow.
That sounds wonderful to me.
Maybe Wade can find somebody that's certified in chemistry and German. Then you won't have the big issues trying to find a German substitute.
Well, I know somebody who's certified in German. You could probably pick up that chemistry certification too.
Yeah, that's true. But that person's not going to do that.
Fair enough. Ms. Cinda, any other questions, number 3, before I move on?
Nope, go ahead.
What we have tonight is the first reading of 2 policies. The first one is facilities and the workplace safety. Ms. Cinda, if you look at it, really the revisions are just focused on the changing language to reflect every school district required to have a health and safety plan and how we're going to integrate those within the school's overall safety rules and strategies. So you'd also address face coverings, but it is recommended for legal liability purposes. It's pretty straightforward. It's the first reading. What I would ask is let's approve the first reading this evening, give the board additional time to look at it. Any changes, we still have another month to correct it, but it's pretty straightforward language. And the second one, Ms. Cinda, is one that I think we're ahead of. It's trauma-informed approach, policy 146.1. And what they're looking there is when Act 44 came out, as you know, they required board members to complete professional development 1 hour in trauma, as well as it must be included in our professional development plan. So again, not only is it required, but to us, I mean, it's an optional policy, but it's required in the sense that is aligned to exactly what we're doing in the area of social emotional learning. There's a lot of barriers to some of our students, and the pandemic's bringing that to light. The need for connectivity, both, you know, internet-wise, but also connecting with the human relations, right? And to be able to talk and deal with your emotions, but understand how some of those traumas may be barrier for, barriers to success. The big thing, though, I would say, though, is as we continue to write for grants and the board supports us in that initiative, we must use and develop a trauma-informed approach plan when we're applying for PCCD grants, which is the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, as well as most PDE grants. So look, Ms. Cinda, to be blunt, it's a step in the right direction. It's aligned to work we're doing, and it's going to be a trigger and a requirement for some funding moving forward. So we're ready to go. Again, we have a whole month before we have to officially approve it, but the draft policy looks good. This will fall under Mr. Zahorchak's purview as far as overseeing the trauma-informed approach. He's one of the best in the business. He'll help oversee that and make sure we have a comprehensive plan. But to me, I see no, even though it's optional, I see no reason why we shouldn't. And it helps us in our grant writing efforts because it tells the grant funders, hey, look, the board's serious enough about this as well, and they believe in it. so much that it made it a policy.
I totally agree with everything you said. I don't think it should be an optional policy. I think it should be mandatory. And I'm glad that we're getting ahead of the game. I think that the far-reaching effects of the pandemic, you talk about trauma. I think we had traumatized children during the Great Depression, and it lasted, the effects were their whole life long. They didn't have anything like this. We need to try to get ahead of that and do everything we can. So I'm 100% behind both of them.
Thank you. And Ms. Cinda, I'll defer to Mr. Zahorchak, but the only thing else I'll say, Ms. Cinda, sometimes when you go through these trainings, and this may sound silly, Ms. Cinda, it opens up your eye to sometimes how we're ignorant and we have our own implicit bias towards some of the issues that kids face with, or we don't really understand their hardships or some of the mitigating circumstances that they're facing. And it allows us to open our eyes and reflect and think about what kids actually go through. Because I got to tell you, the first thing, Ms. Cinda, I thank God I'm old. I didn't have Facebook or Twitter growing up when I was a kid. I just don't know how I would handle some of those things. But anyways, my point is trauma's real, and it does present barriers to kids from learning. And if we're going to be a comprehensive school and take a comprehensive approach, this is a step in the right direction. Mr. Zahorchak, anything you want to add to that from your purview?
Mike, I completely agree with you. I think if, if we have professional development for trauma, I think that opens us up to almost take that a step further. So, when I think of trauma, I think about, if you understand that, a lot of different people come to school with a lot of different experiences. And I think that's, again, like Mike even mentioned, I think that's a good starting step. I think it's step one. I think, there's a lot of places we can go as far as, moving into more restorative practices as opposed to punitive approaches. So yeah, Mike, I think you're right. Thanks.
Ms. Cinda, any other questions regarding those draft policies that we can address for you?
Nope. I will say that I still find that the trauma training that I had as a new board member was very impressive. I learned something. You're right. It does open your eyes, and I think it's valuable, and I'm glad we're doing it.
And Ms. Cinda, not to beat this horse, beat a dead horse, but sometimes people think, oh, if kids would just get over themselves, or if they could just get tough through this, they'll be fine. And some of that's true, I get, right? Some of it we have to learn through resiliency and learn through adversity. But there's also sometimes there are barriers that exist that really are emotional for kids to deal with, like a loss of a loved one, a tragic event, maybe a molestation, maybe some sexual abuse. Those are big time barriers that it takes a lot of support, sometimes more than what the school can offer. But it's a step in the right direction, saying, look, all means all. We're going to love and appreciate our kids, and we're going to do everything we can for them by having a comprehensive approach to educating them, both academically as well as social, emotionally. And Ms. Cinda, if it's okay with you, Mr. Harley has a hand raised on. May I call him?
Absolutely.
Mr. Harley, go ahead, sir.
I'm clarify line 2. The mandatory board training, is that for new board members, or is that going to be a yearly, annual thing? What's my responsibility for the mandatory board training?
I believe my understanding of the law is for any new board member as well as any re-elected board member. So if you were to run again, Mr. Harley, your next go around, your next cycle, you'd be required to go through the training as well. It's part of both experienced board members as well as new board member training.
Okay, so this is actually part of the state law.
Yeah, yes, sir.
That they passed, although there is no penalty if we don't follow it.
That's my understanding. Yes, sir.
I kept asking what they could do to us, and if Barbara doesn't want to do it, we can't make her do it, and the school doesn't lose anything, because there is, at least that's what they told us at the last time they were in.
I believe that to be correct, sir. Yes, sir. 100%.
Well, we're going to make this a policy to make it basically every 2 years. Some of the board members retrained. So okay, that's good.
Yes, sir. I think it's an important topic. Ms. Cinda, if it's okay with you, Ms. Blank has her hand on. Up.
Absolutely. Yep. You don't have to ask permission, Mike.
All right, Ms. Blank.
Howdy. Okay, so I love the idea of the more comprehensive, getting somebody to deal with trauma. I think that I'd like to explore more further with Mr. McElhaney and Justin about a peer group of counseling for the senior high. I know they're doing something. They're starting something for the junior high. They're forming something. I'm not too sure about the details of it, but considering what I know that's been going on the past couple of weeks and friends and family, I think the sooner we get that implemented would be a great idea. So,
I agree. And the one thing I'll say in addition to that, Ms. Blank, it's important for the board to realize this is not just sometimes there's a lot of unfunded mandates that come down to schools. This is a part of the work we're doing. So whether it's with social emotional, it obviously also connects to safe to say efforts, right? To our SAP team prevention. So this is a big part of everything we do. And peer mentoring could be a part of the offerings that we look at. And that's something we can definitely take a good look at because honestly, sometimes kids don't feel comfortable talking to adults. They may feel better be able to talk to their peers, but we just have to make sure they're trained and prepared to do that. Justin, anything you want to add to that? I saw you unmuted for a minute.
Yeah, and Mrs. Blank, I just wanted to mention that we had Wade, Doug, and I had a really great meeting with the Alice Paul House this week in regards to counseling at the high school. And I know you guys have been aware that, we've started a lot at our elementary buildings over the past couple years. And we had talked with the Alice Paul House, and what our idea is to begin with a student screener. And that way we can start to identify students that have experienced trauma. And once we have that in place, I think what we'd like to do from there is kind of get an idea of those kids and what types of concerns or issues they might have, and then tailor specific interventions like counseling that would go out specifically to support those students, just almost how we do at the elementary buildings right now. And just as an example, at Ben Franklin, we were looking at our screener results, and we had, I think it was about 40 less students identified as having a risk just in that one building. So some really good results so far. I think as we kind of expand into other buildings, I think we're only going to see those results, magnified. You would have almost anticipated that those screener results this year would have gone up, just due to COVID, the pandemic, but they actually went down about 40 students. And so there are some of those students who are synchronous as opposed to being in person, that they weren't measured, but it's still a pretty good sign, even regardless of kids being virtual or not virtual.
And the first step before you intervene is you must screen, right? So we don't even know if anyone needs help until we do the screener. So you're starting to see a comprehensive system come together. Ms. Barker?
So I know I'm on the Aaron IU board, but I'm not sure if Aaron offers any type of existing programs like that. I know 20 years ago they did have something. So it might be worthwhile checking in over there and seeing if they have anything to get a baseline of what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And if it's okay with you, Ms. Barker, Mr. Zahorchak, can you talk about the grant we got from PDE that's going to bring in Coping Cat and some other different strategies to help with trauma and deal with stress? Just give a quick overview real quick.
Yeah. So we were able to receive a $20,000 grant from the Department of Education. And the idea behind that is providing evidence-based interventions. And so when PDE awards these grants, they will not even look at your grant unless what you're attempting to do is evidence-based. And so we have a few interventions that will use that $20,000 to purchase the materials and supplies for. One is called Coping Cat, and that's for students that are experiencing anxiety. We also have some money in there to provide aggression replacement training. And so the way we'd identify that is we use that screener to identify whether kids are experiencing like internalized behaviors like sadness, depression, anxiety. And then we look at externalized behaviors like, physical or verbal aggression. And what we do based upon that is we select those interventions. We look at a site. There's a site that shows, programs that have best evidence, and that's called it's called SAMHSA. And we look at that site to look at what's out there, determine, whether the interventions that we'd like to use are evidence-based. We also always run those by, local experts like Tim Runge. And so we have probably about 4 or 5 evidence-based interventions that will roll out that range, in helping kids with, social skills, with anxiety, with physical or verbal aggression. So we're excited about that. We've already started some of those at the elementary. This grant will help us really expand upon that and be able to offer that at all of our buildings.
That's wonderful. Also, I wanted to let you know, Tom, that the training It is mandatory. The email was sent out, forwarded by you, Mike, November 9th of last year, making it a priority even for those reelected, for the directors to do, because I kind of tried to weasel out of it myself and couldn't do it. So just warning you.
Ms. Cinda, any other questions? May I move on to number 5?
Yes, well, by all means.
Okay. The next one is we want to spend some time talking to you and being upfront with the board of directors. Mr. Sokol retired. We're asking the board to eliminate the halftime position, and understand this. We're still going to offer driver's ed. We're just going to offer it internally through another staff member who has a certification in that area. So it will be absorbed. It will be offered. What may be different is focused on more during the school day compared to evenings and or summers. We could still offer in evenings and summers if needed, but we want to give Mr. McElhaney, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Heinrich time to provide some sort of solution, reimagining that position during the year, because they have other outlets as well, where, you know, just good grades can also get you an insurance discount. But we'll be offering it. But we're at this point, you know, by being able to do it internally, we're maximizing the use of the staff, and we're going to generate anywhere between $50,000 to $70,000 of savings, which is, you know, it's not insurmountable. We're not doing it for the savings. We're doing it because we know the board values this and still wants to offer us driver ed, but we're able to do it in a way that maximizes our staff. And you have to understand this. Number 5 is really attached to also lowering the health and PE credits that the academic committee supported last week as well. So they are connected. It still will be available. I want to make that important, make that known, because I know, you know, the committee and the board as entire board is committed and cares about that. But Mr. Heinrich, anything you want to add to that discussion there, sir?
No, that's all I was going to say, is that the two positions were linked. We will be able to provide services, all of the services that we provide now, and still save the district money. So it's both fiscally responsible and still student friendly.
Mr. Schroth?
Yeah, Mike. My question on the motion on eliminating the halftime position, we need to be sure that the minutes reflect that the elimination of the position is exactly what you said. It's not eliminating the program. It's simply reducing the staffing for that program. I think we need to be real clear on that.
Walter, it's not reducing the staffing. We're just reassigning a dual certification. What it's Cinda's dual certifications. So we're going to have the exact same staffing. So you know, we're not retreating on this at all.
Well, I guess that's my point, was to make sure that it isn't misinterpreted either here during the current times or later on, that the program was was reduced or eliminated, that the position was eliminated, but not the program.
Ms. Parker?
How many current hours does the driver's education teacher currently take to teach children, and how many hours will be given to the gym teacher that's going to take over?
Yeah, good question. Mr. McElhaney, you want to address that?
Yes, I can answer. We had a meeting or two thus far, and those questions came up. Mr. Sokol usually has between 20 and 22 and a half hours per week.
Your mic.
Thanks, Jared. We have about, Mr. Sokol has about 22 hours a week. He is able to service around 74 students between September and June. And that's 30 hours of classroom and 6 hours behind the wheel for each student.
So how will it change with the new teacher?
Well, we're working through that right now. We would have to take those hours and put that into the health and phys ed teacher's schedule, thus be about a half time. We're working through what would the driving experience look like with our program. So because the health and phys ed teacher would go to halftime, health and phys ed, then he would have half a day to devote toward the driver's ed program.
There are possibly going to be driving sessions after school or in the evenings and on weekends also, or is it only going to be during school? And if it's on the weekends and evenings also, is there going to be any kind of extra payment required, any extra contractual rulings or you know what I mean?
Good
Well,
question. Go
we
ahead,
will
Mr.
be, we will be working to develop that whole schedule within the teacher schedule that day. So our last period of the day and then the time after school would be devoted toward driving.
And Ms. Cindy, if I can just elaborate, the normal teacher works at nearly 1,500 hours a school year. This halftime position that Mr. Sokol had is about 750 hours. So, you know, you could see that there's time in the day if Mr. McElhaney is able to schedule accordingly. We're going to do everything we can in our power not to maximize it during the day and not do in the evening on the school year. But in the summer, that's something else we could do because we already offer so many gym classes in the summer. We can look at doing the summer, but you know, we want to be cognizant and aware of the staff members' families and other responsibilities they have. So we don't want to overburden or overwhelm everyone. But we think, you know, with this amount of scheduling, we have time to fit in as much as we can and do it the best way we can possible. And if we need to in the summer, hopefully we could do that. And hopefully that, you know, the health and phys ed numbers and the intense amount of numbers and classes that are offered during the summer will decrease now because of changing graduation requirement. So at the worst case, we're hoping it to be a wash, if not, you know, in that summer era. And again, there will be some changes. I don't want to hide that from the committee at all. I don't want to, pretend that there won't be because it's going to go during the day now. So there are going to be some changes, but I have all the confidence in Mr. McElhaney, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Heinrich to work those out. Ms. Cinda.
What kind of extra certifications do the teachers have to have? Is there a driver's ed certification?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
How many of our teachers have that?
One.
Is anybody else going to go for it and get it?
Not that I know. Not that I know of, Ms. Cinda.
So if that person is out, we've got a substitute situation and driving will stop.
Yeah, I mean, it did this year if Mr. Sokol was out. Yes, that's a good point. But what I would say to that, Ms. Cinda, if something happened and we lost someone and we couldn't find a sub, there's always third party, which I know are not the best. And I think there's some bad experience with that, but there are other options if we are presented with that issue.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. McElhaney, anything else, or Mr. Johnson or Mr. Heinrich, anything else you want to add to that? I don't make sure we're clear and I didn't misspeak at all. Ms. Cinda, if there's no other questions, that's all the agenda items. And then we'd like to go to non-agenda items, if that's okay with you, Ms. Cinda.
Yep. Go for it.
We're not ready to come forward and ask for these positions tonight, but we just want to put them on the committee's radar to start thinking about it. And we just want to spend some time talking about and seeing what the board's comfort level is. First and foremost, we're looking at a community navigator. That's someone who would serve in the role of helping connect families to resources both in school and outside of school. The elementaries don't have anyone also that does their attendance besides themselves, the principal or the secretary himself, where the high school and junior high both have attendance officers. So we're trying to morph in a role that really serve as a quasi-social worker, quasi-attendance officer, and quasi go-between school and families to connect them to resources they need. One barrier we're finding is at the elementary level, there's not enough levels of support to go around to connect family to outside resources. And also some of that problem is because there's not enough resources in Indiana County, but we just want to try to connect that and see what that looks like. If we were going to do this, we'd probably bring it under the confidential group, as it's not a teaching position. And it's not the same thing as a guidance counselor. So we thought maybe the confidential group, and we have a lot of work to do to really firm that up a little bit better before we ask the board for anything, and meaning the scope and the responsibilities. And we'll do that here probably next month, but we at least want to put it on your radar. And what I'll do is I'll go over these and then I'll defer to my colleagues, because I know Justin is invested in the community navigator and I know he'd like to speak about, but let me go over them generally and then we can get a little bit more detail. Second thing we're looking at doing, and I know I have permission before, but I'm just bringing it back to working memory. We previously talked to the Policy and Personnel Committee about the need for a synchronous and asynchronous teacher, looking at one or two more teachers. we don't know where we're at, and we don't know how many kids are going to come back. We know, though, there are a lot of kids who are on synchronous instruction, and we know that's working well for us. We may ask the board to consider hiring, maybe post for 2, maybe only hire 1. We're not sure yet. We're going to probably survey the families sometime next month and see who's intending on coming back and see if they can give us a better number. Additionally, at the 4-5 level, we're projecting a need for autistic classroom, special needs autistic classroom, to be at the 4-5 level, and then maybe and perhaps a kindergarten teacher, based upon not the enrollments we had this year. We're thinking and wondering if more people will come back the following year. Now, with that said, and we'll go over, answer all the questions and have allow people to speak. We have to be responsible. Remind you that there's also still a projected deficit as well. So, yeah, we made some great strides this year financially to prepare for the hits that we were going to take due to the pandemic, but there are some other needs that are starting to rise academically, and we wanted to at least put it on the policy and personnel committee's radar. Again, not ready to post anything or ask for permission to post. Just wanted to put on your radar and have a dialogue. Ms. Barker?
So I was going to mention with my Aaron board report later, but Aaron is having a really tough time finding teachers, and one of the teachers they can't find is for their autistic classroom. So that could be a very difficult position to try to fill. Maybe it's just the pandemic related, but maybe it's just the local pool of candidates that isn't there.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. I think it's good. I don't want to sound nasty, but it looks like for all those years where people are bashing education, it's starting to catch up those because people didn't go in the field. And now we're starting to, that tree's starting to bear fruit, I guess you would say. Or not fruit, or spoiled fruit, or no fruit, I don't know. But we're having an issue, and I think your point's well taken. I think it's something we'll have to overcome and adjust. But what we're seeing is just a rise in numbers. And again, I'm not asking for permission tonight. I'm just asking, put it on your radar so when we talk about it, we at least had a reference point. But the numbers are coming, and we're seeing a need. Justin, anything you want to add to Autistic Classroom or the Community Navigator from your standpoint?
Yeah, I'll start with the Autistic Support Classroom. What we're running into is we just started our program at Ben Franklin, and it's going well. But the issue that we're running into is that, when students hit grades 4 and 5, those students are sent out to Homer Center or Penns Manor, and then they come back in junior high and senior high where we have our own programs that are run through the IU. I think that's fine, but there's that 2-year gap where we would send students out, and we actually have 3 students that are out right now that are either at Penns Manor or Homer Center. The other thing that we have is that our autistic support classroom at Ben Franklin is currently full. It's at 8 students, and 8 is the max. And we do anticipate that more students will be coming in. So the majority of our students won't be at grades 4 and 5. The majority will be in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. But I think that there's definitely the need there next year and moving forward as these students continue to grow at Indiana. And the last thing that I want to do with any of the students that have been in our programs is have to have them go out to a different district program or a different district's program and then eventually come back to us in junior high. So I think that's the purpose there. As far as the community navigator, I think a community navigator can be incredibly important. And I think the importance behind the navigator position is, like Mike said, is breaking down those barriers. And I think of it in three big ways. You break down the barriers with attendance, and you think about the things that cause students issues: attendance, behaviors, and so it's the ABCs: attendance, behavior, and coursework. And so I think with a position like that, I think we can do a better job of breaking down some of those barriers, especially in the area of attendance. I think, if you talk with Wade, who's had the TSI plan at the high school, I think if you ask a lot of folks at the elementary, they'll start talking about behaviors of concern as being the #1 barrier. But I bet if you asked junior high and high school teachers, what is the #1 barrier to student success? And I think more often than not, you'll hear them say things like attendance. So I think the community navigator position is one that would definitely be incredibly helpful for us.
Mr. Zohorchak, can you please explain to the board how maybe there's a possibility to fund the autistic classroom support teacher by pulling those kids back from other school, even though it's not a guarantee, it is a possibility, and what that impact would be, sir?
Yeah, I mean, if we had the 3 students that were out in the outside programs come back, Jared would probably be able to correct me on the exact number of what that costs for us to send them out with transportation. I mean, you're looking at, at least $30,000-$40,000 per student, and if you have 3 students that come back, I mean that you're talking about potentially about $120,000 that would come back with those students to the district.
Mr. Heinrich, anything you want to add about the positions from your perspective, sir, especially the synchronous one?
Yeah, for the synchronous and asynchronous teachers, if this is going to become an offering that we continue to have on our slate for learning models, we're going to have to staff it. Currently, a synchronous teacher can handle 1 grade level in approximately 2.5 to 3 hours of time during the day. So they can comfortably handle 2 grade levels. They can uncomfortably handle 3 with some modifications and some creative scheduling on our part. So we are going to need to offer at least, and we're going to have to consider at least 1 additional teacher, if not 2, depending on the enrollment of students or the interest thereof. I also want to just say about the Community Navigator too. The Community Navigator, if we get the right person in that position, is going to add tremendous amount of value as far as social services are concerned and behavioral resources are concerned. We saw so much success with our behavior model, Ben Franklin. It's something that we could duplicate and replicate at the other buildings if we had the right kind of person in that position, in addition to the attendance, in addition to the the hooking families up with services, etc.
And Ms. Cindy, we'll do it before we turn over to Mr. Kerr and Ms. Blank for their comments and questions. Ms. Barker brought up a good point about the need to find good staff. I will say this. I've been completely impressed with the long-term subs that we hired to fill in these temporary positions. Several of them have also special ed certification. Now, I'm not saying they're the greatest fit or perfect fit. I'm just saying these, and I believe they're all ladies, these ladies have done an incredible job meeting the moment and really embracing the short-term change and treating these kids as if their own. So I guess my point would be, I think we have a staple of qualified candidates that if we were to go in any of these directions with any of these positions, I think we can find and fill these voids sooner rather than later. At least I'm hopeful. They've been really conscientious and worked hard during this closure. And when I speak to the principals, they're in those classrooms every day and they're just telling me great things. And we're getting a lot of good emails about especially our synchronous and asynchronous work too. So there's a lot of good going on. So I'm hopeful that we built a bench per se with qualified candidates who can really fill in that need and help us there, Ms. Cinda. And if it's okay with you, Ms. Cinda, I know Mr. Kerr and Ms. Blank had their hand. Can I go to them or did you have a comment?
Yeah, no, I have comments, but you can go to them first.
Okay,
No,
Mr. Kerr.
then you raised your hand first.
That's okay. You go ahead, Terry.
All right. The synchronous, asynchronous teacher 1 to 2, is that with COVID and without COVID, or would that be either?
We're hoping with no COVID, but we don't really know what we're planning for in the fall just yet, sir. So we have to be a little bit agile as far as that's concerned. But even if we go to no COVID, the cost of 1 teacher to teach those classes is infinitely smaller compared to what we would pay in cyber school costs. So if that teacher can teach our kids our curriculum, provide them our counseling services, hook them up with what it is, with that Indiana education instead of shipping them off to a cyber school, we would not only have academic benefits for the child, but we'd also have some financial returns as well, sir.
Okay, thank you. That answers that. And I guess the other thing that be under there is part of the Audit and Finance Committee. I mean, not that this was all a surprise, but there could be a big dollar tag on this, and we got to be careful with moving forward.
No, I agree. And Mr. Heinrich, would it be fair to say that if the board was entertaining the idea of the synchronous teacher position, that we directed the high school and both junior high to look at their schedules instead of giving people extra pay after school for ideal period, that we can try to assign everyone with the computer mediated instruction period that hopefully would help offset some of the costs associated with the synchronous teacher because our platform would change, be built in their day, in their schedule, rather than having to pay extra duty, extra pay. But Mr. Heinrich, I may have misspoke. Do you want to clarify that at all?
No, you're absolutely right. And, again, that was a move again to increase and improve the academic service that we're providing those children to make sure that we are dedicating time in everyone's day to serve that population of students and also cut down on some costs as well. So, we thought it was a win-win. And so far, Mr. McEnany, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Edmondson, and Mr. Minnick have really come through and are given positive reports that this looks like it's going to be a possibility next year.
Ms. Blank?
Sorry, it takes a minute for me to get the microphone working. So I'm with the community navigator and special education teacher. May I suggest that you reach out to the Peels Advocacy Group? They have wonderful resources, and they could help point us in the right direction. And they may know of some some resources that we didn't know about. They work wonderfully with autism children and parents and families. And I was surprised at how much they knew about our community that I didn't. So it's an idea.
Yeah, Mr. Zohorchek, do you mind touching base with Ms. Blank on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Ms. Cinda, I'll defer to you, Ms. Cinda.
Okay, several questions. So the community navigator is going to be a combination of like an attendance officer and a social worker. Is that position going to serve the entire district, or are you concentrating on the elementary schools since they don't have attendance officers?
We were thinking elementary, but it's open to anything, but we were thinking elementary to start with.
Okay. Same question for the synchronous asynchronous teacher. I'm hearing that they can cover 3 grade levels with difficulty, but then Mr. McElhaney and Mr. Minnick are working on it. Are we talking about a synchronous asynchronous for what level?
What we have one person do it now. What we would do if we got one more position, that one we have now would probably do like K1 and 2. The new person would do 3, 4, and 5. That's how this would roll.
Okay,
then,
so that's elementary.
Yes, ma'am. And then
Okay.
hopefully embedded in the junior high and senior high schedules are computer media instruction periods. That way we don't have to pay the extra stipend for Ideal. You see a real change in Ideal happening here.
Yes, yeah. Okay, now my next question is probably a silly question, but why do we have autistic children leaving our district to go to another school? Is it because we don't have an autistic teacher? Okay, so if we get an autistic teacher, one of the ways to maybe help take care of the finances is maybe some other students from other districts will come to our school.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that a common practice?
Yeah, it is. And I actually every now and then will get a phone call about like MDS classes or life skills classroom from a different district that they're looking to place a student. So yeah, you're right, Cinda. That definitely does happen.
And Miss Cinda, what the issue is, and Justin, Mr. Zorchak, correct me if I'm wrong, when it's 1 or 2 kids, it's not maybe cost prohibitive to hire a whole teacher, but when you're at 8 or 4 or 5, then that's when it becomes.
Yeah, and right now, what I'm looking at, like our next year's numbers, we would have, we'd be looking at about 6 kids in each classroom just with our own students, and that would leave, about 4 open spots if there was, if there were any students from other districts that would want to attend.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Cinda, I'll defer to Mr. Cronauer for the last one. I know he wanted to address this evening, so Mr. Cronauer.
You still have.
Oh, go ahead, brother.
Don't leave me out.
Sorry, sir.
When we looked at this a long time ago in the deep dark, we had kids going to, I believe, Homer City to, we were paying rent on an apartment. Are we still doing that? That's a no? Okay.
No, that's a no. I think that might have been a little bit before my time, but I do know that there was at one point an apartment program that was run through the special education department that I believe it was ran out of Homer Center at one point, and I think that shut down a few years ago.
Okay, so we're not doing that anymore. It's,
No.
we're just shipping our 4 and 5s off to the, and then getting back at 6 and 7.
That's correct.
Okay, I was just making sure of that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Miss Leeper, I'm sorry. I saw your hand was up too. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. Thanks. So I have a couple questions. So regarding the autistic, the additional autistic classroom, would that be specifically at the 4 and 5 building?
No, it's not specifically at the 4 or 5 building, and the reason being is what I'd like to be able to do is bring the 4 and 5 kids that we have that are out there back. But the majority of our numbers are going to be in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade for next year. So what we would likely do is organize that. What I'd ask for is for that classroom to probably be based out of Ben Franklin, and it'd be based on their VB map data. And so we have students that are, with other students that have very similar skills. And so regardless of what grade they're in, they would be placed based upon their skill level.
Okay, absolutely. So do we have students in 4th and 5th grade that are not in our district just because they are 4th and 5th graders?
We do.
Real? Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay. So it was just because we don't have an ASD classroom for that grade level.
Right. And right now we're at 8. We have 8 students in our Ben Franklin program, and that's 8 is the max. So even if we wanted to pull them back, we really couldn't. Right.
Absolutely. So are all those students here locally, like at New Story, or are they scattered throughout the state?
No, so the students that you're talking about, the students that we have that are in outside districts.
Right.
Yeah, they're either at Penns Manor. We have 2 at Penns Manor and 1 at Homer Center.
Okay, so they're not, okay. All right. Okay. And then my other question is regarding the synchronous, asynchronous teachers. So Rob said he wasn't sure if this was a COVID thing or a non-COVID thing. So my question is, how many students do we have in those elementary grades currently at a cyber charter school? And are we going to be marketing or contacting those families to try to get them back so we can make this work? I guess I'm concerned that if we hire the position but don't get those kids back, what are we going to do with the position?
Well, yes, and we're constantly contacting those cyber families and seeing if we can get them back. In fact, Mrs. Maruka was successful in bringing 2 families back just recently. So we're always on that task. The nice thing about the situation is if we do hire someone, I mean, we think that COVID is going to exist in some shape or form in the fall. We don't think that it's going to be gone. So if we hire this position and the interest is there, that it's funding itself, it's viable financially, we're good, and we can run the play as called. If throughout the year it fades, as COVID fades and more families come back, and we are unsuccessful bringing families back from the cyber charters, we could always absorb that position when another person retires. So the next time an elementary position retires, and there are, there's not a whole lot, but there are a few on the horizon here shortly, that person would just, instead of staying as the synchronous person, could then go into the fold as a classroom teacher to replace a retirement.
Okay, that's all requires a lot of dominoes to line up and stars to line up appropriately. I think that sounds good. My one thought is, and it may not be applicable for next year because I do also think COVID is going to be around in some fashion, is that if for some reason mid-year the census really drops. In the past, we have had some positions that were just temporary positions. So I'm not sure if we can propose this as a temporary position dependent upon the census. But that may be something we want to do if we don't have a definitive retirement that we could put it in, that we could replace it with. And obviously, that it could be something worked out. But again, I would hesitate to add a position if we're not guaranteed that we'll have the students to fill it.
Yeah, I think those are all good points that we have to continue to monitor and see what our family's interests are. We're just not there yet. That's why we didn't want to come forward and seek permission tonight. We just wanted to have a discussion. So I think those are all good takeaways that Mr. Heiner can use in his planning. Madam Vice President, I saw your hand was up.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. This is just back to a basic question that I'm not sure I'm understanding. At Ben Franklin for 4 and 5, how many spots could you serve in the autistic classroom overall?
So yeah, so that depends a little bit upon like the amount of students. Like if I'm looking at a max caseload, it's 8 students is your max. That would be for students that are full time. Like if for example, there are there's maybe like half of those students that are out in regular ed. That's gonna increase that max caseload. But typically speaking, 8 students, is the max in a caseload. Like right now, we have 8 students in the classroom, and there's only one of the students that spends, a half day or more outside in regular ed.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Okay. I didn't know how many were full-time, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I understand your point, Tamara, and I think it's a good one. It's just that with the autism numbers that you read about in the general science media, it just looks like the problem is continuing at such a pace that I kind of have a feeling we won't have that problem of filling up the room.
Oh, I'm in support of the autism one. I was questioning more just the cyber one. So I absolutely understand the autism one.
Okay, I wasn't okay. I did.
And I think I think it's a great idea to bring the students back to our district. I didn't realize they were not here. So I think this is a great proactive move.
I have a hunch we'll be able to fill the room up regardless, cyber or in. I have a hunch it's probably a pretty good bet. So
Yeah, Julia, you're right. I don't think I have zero doubts at all. I mean, right now we'd be at 6 in one room, 6 in the other, and that's still not even counting the early intervention kids from East Pike. There could still be another 1 or 2 there too.
So, Ms. Cinda, what we'll do, we're not going to request any permission to hire any position this evening as far as that list that we're talking under non-agenda items, but we want to at least put on a committee's radar. We'll continue to do our work and bring it back next month and see where we're at. If that's okay with you, Ms. Cinda.
Yep, absolutely. It was a good discussion.
Ms. Cinda, I don't see any further. Oh, Mr. Harley, go ahead, sir.
I'm wondering if rather than delaying it a month, that you go ahead and advertise a position and see what kind of response we get. These are not these are going to be fairly rare people, and especially if we're asking for dual certifications. So it might be a situation where you hire a qualified individual if we find one, and make a spot for them. So I agree with Julia that that this problem is not going away, and finding qualified people is high on our list. So I'm not sure that it hurts us to put out a request and see what kind of response you get, and then make a decision.
Yeah, I agree with Julia's comment in the chat room. I think we need to be careful and look at this through the lens of the budget also. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, but boy, the more you ask and the more you talk about it, the more you really want it. And I think we need to see if we can afford it first. And Tom, were you talking about the autistic or the navigator or the asynchronous synchronous teacher? Which position are you talking about?
I'm actually talking about all these positions. These are going to be this is going to be as hard to find as physics teachers, to find a good one. And I'm wondering if we can go, if rather than see if we can afford it first, see if we actually can find people that are qualified to do the job, and at the same time see if we can afford it. We're not hiring people when we advertise for them, but we do save ourselves a month. And I think that Indiana is still a pretty attractive place to work. So I hate to be 24 hours late on our best candidate. So I'd like to get the word out early and gather the resumes.
Well,
on all these positions, Linda?
I think it's the first time we've talked about it, and I think we probably have a little bit of time. I think the worst thing that we can do with any of these things right now is to rush into anything. And since this is the first time we've talked about it for, what, 10, 15 minutes, I think we've got some more talking to do, and I really think we should wait and discuss it some more and let Mike and the team do a little bit more research and let the numbers get a little bit more settled and gelled for next year and see what we need.
Ms. Cindy, if it's okay with the committee, what we could do is give us some time and then maybe talk at that audit and finance committee meeting. Let's give the numbers in 2 weeks. That's only 2 weeks from now. And then if the committee feels comfortable moving forward, we can then, or we can wait until March. But we're still ahead of the curve. The good news is most people don't start advertising until April or May. We're a little bit ahead of the curve, so we're good. But let me work with the team if it's okay with you, Ms. Cindy, and see if we can have something for Madam Vice President's committee meeting as far as the impact. We can, really look at the cost there again, and that's my fault. I wasn't prepared to get it done tonight, and that's on me. But I will be ready by maybe audit and finance to give a better update as far as the financial impact, because we wanted to be upfront about that, because there is one, and we don't want to hide that at all. If that's okay with you, Ms.
Yeah, that's okay with me, as long as it's okay with Julia to bring it up at the finance committee.
Yeah, I think we should, because do it, at least do it during our budget review, because that's going to be a packed meeting at the end of the month. We've already got a busy agenda. So unless we get a little more time, if we could go to maybe, well, I don't know. It's hard to fit all that in an hour, but I think we have to try.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Harley, do you have another question, sir? I'm sorry, I don't want to ignore your hands up. I didn't know if you still need something, sir.
No, when it says lower a hand, I guess that means it's up. So, no, I was trying to I thought I took it down.
Fair enough, sir. Yes, sir. Ms. Cindy, if it's okay with you, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cronauer.
Yep.
Jared, you're up, sir.
Thanks, sir. I will just be real brief because I know we're nearing the end of the meeting here. But I did want to put this on real quick for the board members to start to consider. As a district, we need to set our tax collector compensation for the next 4 years. Not for next school year, not the 2021 taxes we'll be sending out in July, but for the following 4 years, mainly because we are coming up on the primary here in May, and anybody who will be running for tax collector needs to know what their compensation would be if they so win one of the districts for tax collecting positions. So we have to have that. We have to make a decision by, I believe it's March 15th is the deadline to file if you want your name on the primary for tax collector. Again, the district has 4 of them: White Township, Indiana Borough, Armstrong Township, and Shalocta Borough. I will also be placing this on the audit and finance agenda in 2 weeks for us to discuss as well. And I'll be sending out some additional information over the next 2 weeks for the board to consider. But we do base our compensation on a per bill rate. Currently for this school year, it's $555. For next year, it will be $560. So we need to make a decision where we want to take it from the $560 for the next 4 years. I can tell you we've done, between us business managers here in Indiana County, because we're all facing this right now, we kind of did a survey to see where everybody's at. There is a range of not only rates, but also ways people bill or pay their tax collectors. And the rates are anywhere from, I believe, $360 per bill to there is one that is more than $560. It's kind of a weird rate where they pay so much for the bill to go out, and then they pay a set rate for every bill that is paid back to the tax collector. If you do both, that tax collector, I believe, is somewhere around $620. They would earn per bill. But again, that is if they both send the bill out and collect on that bill. So there's it varies across the county. We are probably somewhere right in the middle as to what we compensate our tax collectors, if not on a little bit on the higher end. I will send a spreadsheet out to the entire board, exactly what our tax collectors make and a history of that. but I did want to get people thinking about it so that we can make a decision at the next board meeting on the 22nd. But we will have some more discussion at the audit and finance as well. And to answer Ms. Barker's question, we do not pay any type of bonus for bills collected. It is a straight, if you mail the bill out, it is a flat fee. This year it's $5.55.
Madam Vice President, has a question as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Just a quick question, Jared. The last time we did this, did we put a raise in every year, or was it was just one rate for 4 years? I forget.
We did a raise. It was 5 cents a bill per year. So
okay.
It was, $5.55. This year is $5.60. Last year was $5.50, and the year before that was $5.45.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't remember. All righty. Maybe it helped it for us to see that last contract as well.
Yeah, the history I'll send you is probably for the last 10 years. So.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And again, we set this. There is nothing that is saying how much we have to pay, how we need to pay. The district sets this, and then the tax collectors decide if they're willing to run for that. We do pay Shalakta a small amount additional above that bill rate because they only have, on a normal year, 76 partials, which is only about $400. So in order to try and entice somebody to actually do the work that goes into it, we pay an extra $500 for that. And then we do pay Indiana Borough an extra $2,500 to help maintain an office within the borough itself. You'll see that in the history that I send you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Ms. Cinda, that's all I have, Ms. Cinda, if you have any other questions.
Nope, I'm looking forward to seeing the stuff that Jared sends. I've asked him a few questions already, and I think I understand better, but I'd like to read some more, so.
Okay. Ms. Cinda, that's all I have. Do you or any other committee members have anything before we disperse?
Nope, I'm done. How about anybody else? The other committee member is Uta. She's not here. How about other board members? We good? Okay. We'll see you next meeting.
Okay.